Okay, it is 4 o'clock. We have quorum. I'm going to call the meeting to order and look to the committee for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. I see none. I've had no request to pull any of the consent items. However, I did have requests to speak to them. So we will put all the consent items on together. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that? And then we'll open for discussion. Moved by Hubert, seconded by Park. And Councillor Park asked to speak, and then I'll go to Hubert next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make some comments on the 60% waste diversion action plan.
No, it's taken out.
Oh, it's taken out?
Yeah.
Pardon me, I missed all that altogether.
I apologize, that one was moved to scheduled items on the added, so easy to miss. Are there any other of the consent items you want to speak to, Councillor Park?
No.
Okay, Councillor Hubert.
Just the Nortel one, which feels like one of those, it's not quite as bad as Mud Creek, but it's kind of getting that long, right, Sean? Like it's going. So where do we go with this? Like, at what point, what's the end game here, I guess is the best way I can ask that question.
Mr. Mathers?
Through the chair, it definitely has been a very long road, and the primary position of the city has been we want to protect our land from any kind of migration of the product that's on the Nortel site. So moving forward, our focus will be on trying to ensure that the MOACC, or whatever their new name is, that they are focusing on trying to ensure that they have a plan to monitor the groundwater throughout that area. So our focus is to work with the Ministry of Environment and ensure that the city lands are protected.
Will the land, that's not our land, but the other land, ever be able to be brought into useful service again?
Through the chair, we don't have that information currently. That will be decided through the existing work, and the Ministry of Environment would also be involved in those discussions as well.
And to our corporate objectives, in terms of preventing, the contaminants migrating, I guess would be the best way of putting it. What concerns me is as I see one delay after another, and not the measures being implemented. Is that an accurate view?
So as part of the settlement, there is funding for the Ministry of Environment to undertake sampling throughout that area on an ongoing basis. So as our understanding as part of the agreement to settle this was that the Ministry of Environment would be taking the lead on it. So we would, based on what we've been provided, would believe that the ministry would be handling this going forward.
With deference, I don't like words like I believe. I like words that we know that the ministry is doing this because, in the world of beliefs, there can be various interpretations of legislation. We're into philosophy and theology in the world of belief. So I want to make sure that we're protecting the interests. And so perhaps, Madam Chair, we could ask staff just to, I don't want you to report back, but just to confirm that, because it's dragged on so long and the mitigations need to be in place. Because, the rain falls, and things flow. And if we don't have those protections in place, then it just continues to go the wrong way.
So through the chair, we've been told by the Ministry of Environment that they will be doing this. So I can't control what they're doing, of course. But that's our understanding based on what we've been told. And this site and many other sites that we have throughout the city that do have impacts from contamination, we want to ensure that we are monitoring those, and this will be on our list of those sites to be able to ensure that we don't lose track of them, that we ensure that the city's protected.
Do we get a report? Like, do they say, do we get a monitoring report or a quarterly or a biannual or something that outlines that from the ministry?
Through the chair, through this entire process, we've been receiving the reports by Nortel at the time, but also moving forward from the ministry, you'll be receiving any monitoring reports. That was part of our request, is to finalize this.
I think that satisfies the councillor. Thank you very much. I have Councillor Van Holst and then Councillor Park.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, I had a couple questions about item 2.7 on, and specifically the table on page 56. So we're adjusting the budget amounts, and looks like it came out to a zero sum. And I was hoping staff might comment on a couple things. Looking at the sewer separation program acceleration, looks like we're adding almost $3 million to that, which doesn't surprise me and is probably a good idea. But wanted to ask about some of the places where where that money's coming from. One, the SCADA and security upgrades at the treatment plants. So maybe just comment about the security upgrades. Are we, what are we losing there?
Through the chair, as we're probably all aware, when we started the process and actually put in our initial request for funding, one of the requirements was that these items weren't in the budget. So at that time, there was very little information as far as detailed estimates for these projects. So what we did was put in our best estimates at the time, and as well, we were provided an opportunity by the federal and provincial government to make amendments. And we want to be as strategic as possible as far as where we're going to be using this money. So what the decision was made to try to reallocate some of this funding to some of the projects that we thought were a little bit higher priority to us. So one of those projects, and I'll let some of the division managers speak to this, we decided to reduce the amount of spending on certain projects to allocate them to projects that we felt were on a citywide basis a higher priority. So firstly, we'll have Aaron Rosenthal, he'll speak to the sewer separation project. And then regarding the SCADA project, Jordy Gauld, who's the division manager of the wastewater treatment, he can speak specifically to the reductions in that program.
Hi. So yeah, I'll start with sewer separation. So this particular project was one we did apply for funding for the design for with the original application, and we went forward with that. As part of the design, we did find it did come up on the priority for projects, specifically as noted in the report. This project with a few others actually causes us to be able to eliminate a sanitary pumping station in our system, which is large efficiencies both from environmental and a financial perspective. So that's really what came behind this one going up in our priority list.
Through the chair, as far as the SCADA and security upgrades go, Scott mentioned that was a very high level estimate at the time for CWWF. At the time, we incorporated all the wastewater pumping stations and all the water pumping stations with that estimate. And as we got going through it, it became obvious that there wasn't really it wasn't an efficient upgrade. And as well, we incorporated some of the plants that we were going to be doing subsequent work with as well. So we removed that from the scope of these projects, just, because they were not high priority.
Thank you very much. And I guess the other thing I was going to ask about was the water main cleaning and relining. And I guess we did some inspections and condition ratings to their sort of the second and third last items there is about $3 million less we're spending. Did we get lucky on these things? Find out that there wasn't as much a problem, or did we not look? I sort of, the inspections are down a bit. Just tell me what kind of happened there, and I'd appreciate that through the chair.
So through the chair, I will just add again that we were able to be a bit strategic when we reevaluated the funding that we're spending here. So we were able to do, and this wasn't very highly outlined in the report, but we were actually able to allocate a significant amount of the funding to the Vauxhall treatment plant related project that we initially had come forward with council with a request to increase the budget and use completely funding from the sewer reserve fund. And doing this and actually being able to use the federal provincial funding, we actually reduced the city's share of that project by $1.4 million. So we had to strategically look at some of the other projects that were maybe a lower priority to be able to maximize the amount of funding that we're using from the program, the provincial federal program, and minimize the amount of money that was being used from the reserve fund. So that's part of the discussion. As part of our justification for this project, as it was mentioned, we did take a look at the scope and the number of water mains that were to be relined and reduce that, and that's part of how we were able to increase the amount that was applied to other projects.
Okay, thank you very much. So although this comes out to a zero sum, it looks like you were able to actually get us a bigger bang for the buck by doing that. So thank you and well done.
Councillor Park.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to speak on the amendments to the traffic and parking bylaw. This was spurred by a letter that was written by the Covent Garden Market about some issues that they were having with people leaving the parking garage and the level of traffic on King Street. And the recommendation coming from staff to create what we're calling it, an afternoon rush route, I think that'll be well received. I think it'll really help traffic flows on King Street, and I just wanted to thank staff for their work on that.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other comments on the consent items? Seeing none, we'll open the vote.
Closing the vote, motion passed 4-0.
Thank you. That now moves us into the scheduled items, and I'll give Mr. Stanford an opportunity to get to the podium. I think that he's going to give us a brief presentation. He asked me for 85 minutes, and I said 10, and I think we settled on 15. So we're going to have a short presentation and an opportunity for question and answers.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. The report is actually report number 2.6 on the blue agenda. And I guess this presentation is listed as 3.1. And what we're covering off is quite a significant package that has been delivered to all elected officials. That is referred to as our 60% Waste Diversion Action Plan. This particular plan went before the Waste Management Working Group last Friday. The road to 60% diversion. Well, if you look back in time when we got started, about 1987, give or take, we have been moving up on a regular basis since then. We had a big jump in 1995, won't go back too much in time, but that was when we basically implemented the leaf and yard waste collection program at the curb, and we expanded the blue box program. And since then, we've had a steady, continuous increase to where we've hit 45% diversion, and for about the last 4 years, we've been sort of held at that. Our first sort of comprehensive look at a green bin program was about 10 years ago. There had been discussion prior to that, but I think that was probably the first time when we looked at it from top to bottom. We're here today because back in October of last year, there was a direction to put together a 60% action plan associated with our landfill site and our landfill expansion project. As I mentioned, we're at the working group just this past Friday, and they supported in principle the project that's before you tonight. Stepping back as well, though, looking at where this ties together in the bigger picture, of course, it tie in very nicely with our strat plan as well as the London plan. And I guess, depending on where you sit, perhaps the most important would be some of the regulations that have come from the province on why we have to do some of these things. And that has been an evolution that to this day still continues. But where we sit right now, really two driving pieces. When it comes to landfill expansion, every indication out there is that one does not get a landfill site expanded if you're not playing nice with the province and following their direction and their desires. That has been sort of proven time and time again, and we're actually living that right now as part of our landfill expansion plans right now in our dialogue with the ministry. Then there are regulations that are now in place associated with the organic fraction of the waste stream, and those just came out this year. So we package all this together, we look at London, and we're delivering a plan that we believe makes sense for London. Our focus, of course, is on single-family and multi-residential homes. That combined waste stream is about 160,000 tons, of which we're diverting 45% right now. However, we never ignore what's going on in our industrial, commercial, and institutional sector, as well as our construction, renovation, and demolition sector, because there are synergies with all those areas. Combined, there's a lot of resource and waste in the City of London, no different than any other municipality in Canada. It's how you package things together, and that is what we have taken a lot of time to do in this particular report. Many different pieces of literature and research was done to pull together what we believe is our plan that is wise here for the City of London, including about a year-long engagement process. The key parts in all of this, when you look at waste composition, the answer is in the bag. And that's really what it's all about. It's first understanding what is placed at the curb, and we have a very good understanding of that here in London. Why? Because over the years we've been involved in a number of waste audit programs looking at what's inside garbage bags. And there's a lot of consistency with what's occurring here in London as well with other communities in Ontario. And what comes out is sort of the top items now that sit in the bag, whether it's in the bag or the bin in a multi-residential building. On the screen are basically the top 5 categories. 2 deal with food waste, avoidable and unavoidable. And combined, they represent we're looking at about 35% of the material. The interesting part is the avoidable food waste, and we'll come back to that. Other organics, that includes tissue papers, things that end up in the garbage and are considered on the organic side. Diapers would be included in that as well. Pet waste, a surprising number, and this is by weight, 10% by weight. And that's a combination of dog feces, kitty litter. And then finally, the other item that always catches our attention is 10% of the bag or the remaining garbage out there should be in the blue box, and it's just not. In our report for you, we broke 21 actions down into 6 categories. And so I'm going to cover off each one, not in great level of detail, but happy to go back to any of these slides at any point in time. Blue box, blue carts. This is the industry's program, and that is where the legislation is taking us, and that's been in place now for 2 years. We're suggesting no new investment in this area. Continue to maintain what we're doing now. We're very supportive of all those initiatives in place, but at the same time, let's not invest. Let's let industry do its part and the province to push forward in that area. And we believe that will occur because every indication right now is suggesting that they've got to capture more materials. Those same recyclables that I just showed you that were in the garbage bag. Along the way though, as this moves to industry's responsibility by 2022 or 2023, that is when we're going to start to see this revenue come back into the City of London of about 1.5 to 1.8, and we'll come back to that number. New or expanded recycling. Not to do with the blue box or the blue cart program. This is looking at things such as ceramics. It's looking at mattresses. It's looking at bulky furniture. And we've laid out a number of actions associated with that in our plan and want to invest in some of these areas. In some cases, there'll be pilot projects. In other cases, it'll be following the provincial lead until there's a point in time where, no, we should perhaps do some local investment here. This is an area that represents what we believe are some interesting local opportunities from a job perspective. More scrap metal recycling in the form of appliances would be done here locally. More furniture coming out of the waste stream would be done here locally. Carpets are part of that. Right now, there is not a carpet recycler in Ontario. There is only one mattress recycler in Ontario. We look at southwestern Ontario as being a marketplace that could be served by facilities sitting here in London. Curbside organics, the biggest part of the investment. We're looking at, and as our report indicates, we've gone over 2 major systems. We are recommending now as staff a weekly green bin system. We're recommending garbage go to every 2 weeks, where many communities have gone to. Those that have been in the green bin business for 5 to 10 years, we're suggesting that we can leap right now with knowledge to every 2-week garbage pickup. What we have to get through is the dialogue on what do we do with diapers, sanitary products, and pet waste. And you'll see in our document that is one of those unanswered questions, but there's enough of the experience in Ontario that these are items that can go into the green bin if council desires. That is why you do see a wide diversion range. Depending on the ultimate design will impact that diversion. Mixed waste processing versus green bin. We had a very good look at this. We've also followed Region of Peel, Region of Durham, who have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into these programs. We've watched very closely what's occurred in the city of Edmonton. Essentially, it is a technology that is not there yet. The evidence does not support the additional investment required to obtain the higher level of diversion. So that is one of the things here we've set up on the screen. There are some advantages. If it were something today that we could tell you is technically feasible, it would be potentially a more significant investment financially, but would get you a higher diversion and more environmental benefits, and arguably a more convenient system for homeowners because they don't have to do much work. The reality is these systems are not working where we're comfortable to recommend them. They are more expensive on the disadvantages side. This is technical uncertainty that is out there, not only in Canada, parts of the US, and in fact over in Europe, where they're only able to push some of these systems into 50% diversion, meaning you process 100% of the material, but you're only diverting about 50% of it. There's a lot of good work going on in this area, and you'll see how we're addressing that in a minute. Multi-residential organics. This is one of the biggest challenges that other communities have had, because getting separation systems in place is very difficult in a multi-residential environment. Often there's just a single chute. Recycling remains one of our biggest challenges in these buildings. Communities have tried to have source separation systems for organics, and they are challenging. Most of the material is coming out that is very difficult to actually compost or digest because of the high levels of contamination. This is one area where municipalities in Ontario are looking at from the perspective of mixed waste composting. And part of our recommendation is looking at, we should be going down that road in a small pilot project. We're recommending here about 15% of our building units, somewhere around 100 buildings, would participate in a pilot project. There's more work to do on this. We want to line up a few other municipalities to work alongside us because there's only one pilot facility in Ontario at this point in time. So there is an opportunity. It's something that will not be a perfect system, but it would allow us to carry down this particular path. And why is that important? Because what we've got in front of you tonight, basically from a green bin perspective, is really a transition program. We do believe that mixed waste processing and further anaerobic digestion is part of the future. It's just not there yet. So therefore, what we're recommending is a system that can transition in the future when these different technologies are feasible and technically strong. We'll come back to that discussion, I'm sure. Other organic programs. 3 actions are recommended here. The biggest one, well, 2. Carry on with what we're doing, home composting and community composting. In fact, grow that marketplace. And we've set aside budget to do that. Most important, though, is to understand this one. The amount of food that should be avoided, because right now it's ending up in the garbage bag, it is significant. If you quantify that, we've proven these numbers working with Western University and a PhD candidate up there. There is a lot of dough that is being placed into the garbage bag. When I say a lot of dough, unfortunately, food that should have been consumed being placed in the garbage bag to the tune of $80 to $100 million. And if you just realistically say to yourself, let's put in place a program, and it would take a while to adjust behaviors, to tap into 10% of that, $8 to $10 million saved. Now that's back into ratepayers' pockets by helping them understand meal planning, proper refrigeration, the difference between a best before date and an expiry date. This is not a London issue. This is actually a North American, Europe, and other continents around the world. Wasted food has probably become one of the #1 issues in the waste management field. Reduction in reuse, because everything we don't have to handle does not have a cost associated with it, other than some investment to help make it happen. Very community driven. To conclude our community engagement program, we had an independent survey done by Ipsos Reid. The full package from, Ipso's Public Affairs, I believe they're called now. The full package actually is in the larger document, so you have all the details and demographics covered. It was an online panel survey, and the results, the key findings there are on the screen in front of you. Overwhelming support there for waste diversion, 93% being somewhat or very important, with 53% stating very important. Support for food waste avoidance, support for a curbside multi-organics program of some kind, and you'll see how the differences were lined up in the particular document. And then the notion of recovering some materials, and we've identified the drop-off depots as logical locations for these materials to end up. Why? Because Londoners use these places right now on a regular basis. There will be a need, though, to expand or perhaps further add to that depot network. A key question on the Ipsos Public Affairs Survey was willingness to pay for more waste diversion. And the results are before you and in your report. Fairly straightforward. We made sure that every time we talked about more waste diversion, we were very clear that there are costs associated with it, other than when it comes to food waste avoidance and some waste reduction. You can save money in those cases. But for the most part, there is going to be increased costs. Environmental benefits, these happen to be, we were directed to produce a 60% plan, and yes, there are environmental benefits. We didn't work the other way around. We produced the plan and then looked at it and said, let's deliver a plan that is wise for the environment. So not only does it divert more materials from a landfill site, there's no surprise there. It does have an impact on greenhouse gas in the way of reduction. Reduced impacts to the landfill site, less organics at a landfill site will actually reduce the amount of odor produced. Better use of materials, as we've noted in the report. Then there's the social side. These are first one's not a soft one. Enough statistics are out there now to talk about waste diversion basically creates jobs. Putting materials into a landfill site creates very little when you really, really think about it. Large truck, large vehicles running over top of garbage. Waste diversion, lots of different pieces of equipment, lots of people doing things. Finally, financial savings. Two ways of looking at it. On an annual basis, yes, there will be some landfill savings. Anywhere between $350,000 and potentially as high as $500,000 per year. We've not included that in our funding source. And the only reason we haven't done that at this point in the time is, as you know, we're doing our big landfill expansion, and we don't know the costs associated with that. So we've parked that amount of money at this point in time as staff. Just want to make sure it's not hidden. It's here in our document. We're just wondering, we believe it'll be better applied when we get into our landfill expansion, because there will be costs there. As you modernize your landfill site and look to the future, costs tend to go up, not down. And then finally, we also looked at what would happen if we did not expand our landfill site and we were out of the landfill business by 2025. And always a possibility a municipality has, as a number in Ontario do. We would have costs in the order of $5 to $7 million to move our materials to another location in southwestern Ontario, most likely, or possibly into Michigan. And you'll see in a minute, as we pull all the numbers together, the range for 60% waste diversion is in the $5 to $7.5 million range as well. Oh, here it is, the slide right there. So when we take together our 6 categories of work, covering across our 21 actions, knowing that there are levels of investment that will spur on more diversion, and that's why we're dealing with ranges, we have that number at the bottom, between $5 and $7.5 million investment per year, fully rolled out. We then sort of said, what would be the likely, based on our knowledge here in London. We've been working with residents for decades right now on what they're capable of doing, the desires in this community, the results of surveys, the results of community feedback. That is how we came up with our likely cost, which reflects the level of diversion. And then we broke it down by the cost per unit, the cost per household, assuming 180,000 households. So that's all your curbside households, and that is all your multi-unit households combined, 180,000, because 60% diversion is for everyone. We then looked at capital costs, and we had done some of this work in the past, and we presented it to during budget deliberations about 2 years ago, and the capital costs are still in the right order of about $12 million, focusing on the curbside program. We then looked at what additional investment we required at depots in a few of these locations. So the number would be about as high as $15 million. As you're aware, in the budget right now, we do have a category. It's called New and Emerging Waste Diversion Technologies and Programs, and there's a $35 million amount assigned to that, of which the funding source includes federal gas tax, includes landfill reserve fund, as well as in the future, should be needed, if it's needed, debentures. But about 17 million in federal gas taxes have been assigned to that particular program. So that could, if council desired, basically fund the capital investment that's required. Other potential funding sources. We've already talked about quickly the provincial legislation to the tune of about 1.5 to 1.8 million. As you know, right now, industry pays for about half of the recycling costs in London. This would cover up the remaining costs. We also, unless something changes, and we look at the level of risk on that one being low, that has been discussed in this province for many, many years, in fact, decades. So now it is actually law. And as you know, we've been working on the Blue Box Amendment Program, and that became stalled during the election. We have not heard any change since the new government came in. And in fact, the new government was actually quite involved in the Blue Box Amendment Program and the program just before that too. So we have, at this point, strong confidence that that will proceed as is, and that's why we consider that one a low risk. The other EPR programs, potentially a little bit higher risk, because those are things that the track record is very weak at this point in time, so we're not sure on whether they will hold. But by way of an example, in some jurisdictions, there's $20 charge for every mattress that is purchased. There's a $20 deposit that goes off to an industry-funded organization, and that $20 is then used to recycle that mattress. These things can actually be quite simple. There is some strong track records of that being applied to electronics and a few other materials, tires, for example, in Ontario. So they are, on some items, very easy to identify. It's whether the government will follow through on those, and we do keep our fingers crossed on that, because that does fit into our plans quite nicely. And then finally, the other one that would be fully within council's control would be, it's been used in other jurisdictions carefully, referred to as a landfill levy. For every ton of garbage that comes in, a small amount is set aside for waste diversion. And that's ranged anywhere from $1 or $2 in some jurisdictions. I've seen it as high as $20 in other jurisdictions. Many factors go into that type of decision, because you have to make sure you're balancing the marketplace to make sure that you actually don't lose all those tons. It can be a bit of a slippery slope, because you're funding a program based on something you're trying to reduce, so you've got to do that very wisely. It can be part of a suite of options to fund programs. So to bring the numbers together, as we did in the report there, 6.5 million, a likely amount of 2 million coming into the system. And you see how then, of course, it drops down to 4.5, or about $25 a household. It does require a funding strategy, because the biggest pot of money coming in, the 1.5 to 1.8, is not till about 2022 or 2023. So that is something there that staff would have to discuss with finance to figure out what the options are on a program such as this, should this be the direction we follow. From a multi-year budget perspective, very little activity in 2019. There are some funds that are assigned, and they would be used to basically get the wheels in motion. We'd move a little bit more from the maintenance that we've been doing and keeping the 45% diversion intact to moving down the track of where we think is most appropriate, the waste reduction, the food waste avoidance, but getting ourselves ready. The 3 big years are the ones that are on your screen, and this is what it would look like from our understanding of a multi-year budget perspective. 1.3 in the first year to get out of the gate, working very hard on the waste reduction reuse side, an area where we have funded very little, to be honest, in our program. It's just been something that we haven't paid as much attention to. The green bin program would basically, it takes about 2 years to get in place, but basically it would be on the ground in the summer of 2021. And that is why you see a significant sum of money associated with that coming into that at that time frame. And then the latter would be the fully funded program in 2022, when it is rolled out for an entire year. 3 slides to wrap up, Madam Chair. This was discussed at the Waste Manager Working Group meeting. Where are we at compared to others here in Ontario? On average, about 49% diversion is the latest data from 2016. That may or may not have inched up for 2017 data, which is not yet available. The 6 reporting communities that are available in the database are the ones, sorry, the four that are above 60% are on the screen. The region of York, though, we have to recognize actually contains about 9 different municipalities, of which Markham, probably the highest in Ontario at 71%. I don't think there's anyone else higher. And in fact, we had a nice presentation from those folks about a month ago. And there are about 16 communities in the 50 to 59%. And as a reminder, we're at 45%. The other one that we really look at in a big way, because the accountability that goes into it, is the Municipal Benchmarking Network of Canada. It used to be in Ontario, now it has expanded. And so on the screen, if we just go line by line, London's existing program, we're looking at $139 a household, and you see how it's broken down between collection, disposal, and diversion. That is not the net cost. We're not allowed to remove some revenues from that, but it's consistent. So everything on this slide is very consistent. We then looked at what would be the lowest diversion with an existing green bin program, and you'll see that in the green circle. That is Hamilton right now. That's $69. But when you add together their collection and disposal, and we're not sure if they're 100% accurate, it comes out to $218. But from a diversion perspective, that is the lowest within our benchmarking club. We then looked at Niagara, which is overall the lowest, and with a green bin at 192, and that's why that's circled in blue. When you pull together all the communities that are in this, that have a green bin, and there's 9 of them, that is the gold-colored line at $227 across all your services, including the green bin tucked into the diversion. The last 2 lines are just to help you understand that we have, for years, under the direction of council, delivered a solid waste management program. One that has been cost-effective, it has met the needs of this city, and it has moved diversion, as you saw in the first graph, at a reasonable and affordable pace. We believe getting to 60% under our likely keeps that price point at a very, in our opinion, an affordable number for London, and even at the high cost, in staff's opinion, going up $5 extra per household at $178, we are still tracking up there with the best communities in Ontario, and many of these are now across Canada. And our last slide, which is basically what we would be recommending to you, is that this is a lot of work captured together by everyone from our Waste Management Working Group, from our advisory committees, from the community, that this particular project go out for about 6-7 weeks of just sort of final dialogue in the community, and we come back with a public participation meeting, if approved, at Civic Works at the end of September. And that's it, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stanford. I wasn't standing up because of your presentation. I have one of those weird chairs that's not comfortable. So I had Councillor Squire had initially requested to speak to this item, and then Councillor Park, so I'll keep that order.
Thank you very much for the report. Interesting and a lot of material. I'm glad you mentioned that. 2 things. First of all, how confident are you that this is going to get us to the 60% level of diversion required by the province? And I don't want you to guess. I want you to be straightforward and say, we're not completely sure, or we're very sure, or it's a number that we're not, we just can't predict.
Through the chair, because our report worked with ranges, we looked at these programs and said they have the potential as going as high as 21% diversion. And so therefore, when we've sort of looked at what we believe Londoners can do with reasonable effort, they've got to embrace a program like this, getting to 15%, which is then essentially 60% with these programs in place. I have good comfort that that can be done by London.
Okay. Is that as good as I'm going to get? Good comfort? So I'm being serious here because this is an important matter. So through the chair.
Yes, the reason I say good comfort, in all honesty, is this: we have got to encourage Londoners to deliver their part. If council puts these programs in place, and based on experience in other communities, 60% has been reached. This is the advantage of coming after other communities. We get to learn from their challenges and basically not repeat their mistakes. And so I am very comfortable that we'll be able to get to 60% and potentially a little bit higher. And I think, though, a big chunk of that will be the decision on what we do with pet waste and diapers.
Just another question. I'm not going near pet waste. I went there once before, and I can tell you, this, and I'm going to say, well, here I go. I suggested at some point in time, that, and yeah, the media's looking at me. I suggested at one point in time that maybe people could do something about pest waste. And I can tell you, when you talk about educating Londoners, there were hundreds and hundreds of people angry at me about suggesting they make their own arrangements with pest waste. To the extent that there was a little group that suggested they were all going to bring their pet waste and put it on my front porch, which my wife was quite upset about. But I think it goes to the issue of you think Londoners are, I was very surprised at that, quite frankly, that happened, but it did happen. And my wife will be really happy that I mentioned it again. What I really want to ask, though, is at this point in time, you're asking us to approve in principle. And I don't understand what that means, because we generally approve things. If I approve this in principle, does that mean I've approved a green bin program and the related costs, and let's say you would expect me that if something came up through the budget process or new developments or input from the public that I can't change from that?
Mr. Stanford?
We have used this terminology before, and our understanding of how it works is that we're going into an engagement process again for 2 more months. And we would like to have the confidence of council that they're approving of this direction in principle. And so therefore, when we're dialoguing with the community, this is a direction that they're comfortable in proceeding, subject to final approval. So this is not final approval, so we're seeking from council next week. We would like to hear, though, that this particular plan to reach 60% and the boundaries that we've set in this is acceptable to council. It makes it easier for us to dialogue with the community and indicate that we have the support of council.
Thank you, Councillor Squire. I'll go to Councillor Park next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hopping off from where Councillor Squire was talking about, when we talk about approvals, I kind of take the approach that council's in a state of approval, that it's good enough to go out to the public for comment. So that's where I come from on that. I think I've heard a lot of things today that make me quite happy, talking about waste avoidance, recovery, and all those sorts of things. And in particular, the wording around how this could benefit the economy, looking at London as a marketplace for recyclables in southwestern Ontario. And perhaps this is something where London can certainly lead in. I know this is a lot of work, and I think there's been a lot of humming and hawing waiting to see where the industry was going with the technology and recognizing that we're at a point here where we can finally move forward. I think that that's a good thing, that we know where all the information is. I remember earlier on in this term, I think it was the first multi-year budget, a few councillors were trying to get this off the ground, but we were waiting on the technology front. So disappointed in the technology, but that's no one's fault but the industry itself, I guess. I'm very supportive of hearing from my colleagues on this, but I think that we're going to get a lot of good feedback from the public. I think there's been a lot of Londoners waiting for a good long time for a green bin program, and I think that there'll be quite a lot of people that are happy about it. And thank you, Mr. Stanford. I know you've put ages into this work.
Thank you, Councillor Park. I have Councillor Van Holst next, and then Hubert.
Thank you very much. So staff has done a tremendous amount of work and very good work on this. This is a good plan to get to a 60% diversion. There's a lot of exciting ideas in there. And then one idea that I'm not excited about, because I'm not really excited about the 60% diversion either. The plan is based on the assumption that that's what we'll need to get in order to have our landfill approved. But I think that the strength of that assumption has been reduced dramatically with the election of this new government. That remains to be seen, but it's something I'm going to look at. The idea of green bin and waste diversion sounds like a great idea. I believe it's never been done because it's never been a fiscally responsible thing to do. So a green bin program is basically going to cost us, over the life of the landfill site, an extra $100 million over 20 years. And what I would like, and I'll probably come to council asking for this, although I'll certainly approve this to go out to the to the public to look at. And again, I said that the plan itself is good, but I always wonder what else can we do with the same amount of money? And we've got a social housing stock that needs $400 million worth of regeneration. And over, the life of this is $100 million, it's 25% of that. That's another place where we could potentially put that money. And some of the advantages of that are that we would also get a number of these benefits happening. So greenhouse gas diversion in near or net zero new buildings could far exceed what's suggested here. Certainly, it would create jobs as well. So by doing that, we would certainly create a number of jobs. Anytime we take $5 million a year from our residents and then spend it on something, it's likely that jobs are going to be created. It's just a matter of what's the best thing to spend that on. So what I'll be looking for is ask for a business case, a brief one. What do we actually get for our investment of about $5 million a year? And that would be a couple years extra on the landfill site, and also so much greenhouse gas diversion. Those are basically the benefits there. And then I want to see what could I get if we spent $5 million a year on regenerating the housing stock. What would happen there? Because we so often at this council make decisions based on a single issue outside the broader context of the city's challenges. And we've got big challenges. And I see a landfill site as a huge opportunity. If we can simply dump things into a hole while we deal with the more pressing issues, that's great for us. And other communities go with the green bin program because they don't have this asset. And so that's the reason. I'm going to be looking to our provincial government to see if we can get around that. And I'd like to show them the two business cases and say, here's what we get if we go with a green bin, and here's what we get if we invested that in housing, which is a huge issue, and it's an issue that came up this week again. So that's what I want to be able to see, is what's that going to be, what do those two things look like, and is that strong enough to make a case against putting off the green bin until we get to the better technologies that we expect to in the future, which is the mixed waste proposal. So those are my thoughts. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Van Holst. Councillor Hubert?
Thank you. Just a couple of points of clarification. I'm flipping between the two reports, so but particularly on the chart, I guess it's the same chart actually, on page 46 of the original agenda, Jay, where it's the estimated operating cost of, let's say $6.5 million on an annual basis. So the capital startup or the capital costs related to this, I think you said 12 million. And do we amortize those into the operating like you would, in a general business sense, or are they totally separate from the?
Through the chair, the up to 15 million capital would be kept separate. We have traditionally done that when it comes to especially the use of federal gas tax. We make sure it's very visible, but it is not included in operating costs.
Okay, thanks for the clarity on that. And I guess the question I have is, what assumptions, and in this sort of dynamic political milieu that we find ourselves, are there assumptions in the plan that could put it into jeopardy if there was a change in policy from the provincial government? So, I mean, I'll give an example. You referenced 100% producer responsibility. that has been part of the conversation in the province for some time, but it's also been very slow to actually come into reality. Quite frankly, it was part of the 2010 plan, which you reference in here with a very, the old graphic. I still have it, Jay. But it's slow in coming forward. And, you know, will those things really have a detrimental impact on us being able to implement what you're presenting here?
Through the chair, there's an element of risk with funding from any level of government, as we're going through right now. There's an element of risk with existing legislation that is in place that is here to support extended producer responsibility. What we have to fall back on is when you look at places like British Columbia, it is in place and municipalities do not pay for recycling. So there are those examples right here in Canada where it's occurring. In Quebec, the funding that comes to municipalities is very, very significant. So on either side of us, in Nova Scotia, there's other funding mechanisms that are far superior to what's occurring in Ontario. So I look at that and I sort of say, and that's why we've said by 2022, with the support of Ontario municipalities, they have got to hold, legislation's in place, we worked hard to do that. You've got to hold feet to the fire to now get the enabling regulation, to follow legislation with regulation. Industry is already trying to do that, and that is why they had an amended Blue Box program plan. It just hit the barrier of a provincial election. By design, who knows? But basically, all sides were moving in the right direction. It was not a perfect plan. Some, in hindsight, might look back and say we should have maybe rammed it through and be happy with 80%. But now we've got a new set of circumstances, and we have another couple of years. In fact, I'm at a meeting this Thursday looking at how we're going to, as municipalities, collectively write the provincial government regulation, because we're not sure they've got the staff to do it right now, but they've opened the door for us to do it, and that is the angle we're going to take. But there's always an element of risk, and that is why we're very careful in our reports to make sure we're talking about 6.5 and as the top end number, and then $2 million is likely in the way of funding over a variety of years.
I'm curious about the $20 on the mattress too. I think I changed out mattresses up north at our cottage, and I got dinged $40 for 2 mattresses. So, you know, it is being implemented in other municipalities, and I think there's some value in looking at that. The problem is the opportunity for there to be a recycling market for that is pretty minimal, as you indicate. Same thing for carpets. So I think that's something that we could look at and maybe implement a little sooner than what's on the schedule here. You'd buy a tag, and it'd be a tagging system of some sort. So anyhow, overall, as always, Mr. Stanford, your reports are comprehensive and detailed and costed out and well laid out as well, and easy to read. So thank you for that.
Councillor Turner?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for recognizing me, and thanking Mr. Stanford for your presentation as well, and all the work that's going on into this well into multiple years. I think I started being involved back in around 2003 or so in this discussion. I'm glad we're finally coming around to getting to curbside organic management. I think that's a really important step. I think we can talk about the opportunity costs all day. We've got 100 services that this city provides, and we could get out of any of them and increase the amount of money we spend on anything else. But while there's a fiscal responsibility, there's also moral and environmental responsibility that this municipality has to protect its environment and to also be a good steward of its waste. I think that's one of the challenges of a municipality, is it creates an incredible amount of waste. In fact, Canadians are one of the largest producers per capita of waste in the world. So we need to do something about that. I'd like to see our target rate above 60. I think 60 gets us to where we should have been 10 years ago. In fact, the province had kind of asked us to get to 60 by 2008, and now it's 2018, and it's going to be 60% in around 2022. So about 14 years later, we're late to the party on this, and I'm disappointed by that. One of the things, though, however, is that question of us as individual producers of waste. We saw on that quadrant that showed single families, multi-family residential, or multi-family residential, industrial, commercial, institutional, all the sectors. Single family had the highest diversion, and the other ones were all, one, I think it was commercial hovering around 50%. And ICI and multi-unit sitting around 18 to 20%. So low diversion rates from those sectors. Those are kind of areas that I wish we could push a little bit harder on. And that waste reduction piece in the summary of diversion table on this project looks like we could estimate a likely diversion from waste reduction, reuse, and initiatives and policies of about 1.4%. Consider that our container limit on the curb is about 3 containers. If you remove one of those, it's a 33% reduction in waste. And putting pressure upon that. If we take a look at other municipalities that have approached waste collection as a utility, the more you produce, the more you pay. So I'm kind of curious where, specifically with waste reduction or waste collection as a utility, how much have we examined other municipalities? I know municipalities as large as Seattle, Winnipeg use waste collection utility models rather than just to put into the levy. How effective have those been in terms of waste reduction opportunities?
Through the chair, we have not done a recent review. We have, though, tracked the progress in Toronto, where it is no longer on the tax side of the equation. It is a fee base, and people living in Toronto rent one of 4 size garbage carts. And that cart then covers all the costs of all the services. So if you choose to have a very large garbage cart because you want to produce a lot of garbage, then you are basically paying upwards of $400 to $500 a year for all your services, but through the cart. Ottawa has a slightly different program in place where they have the majority of the program through on a tax rate. They do have some revenues coming in through their landfill program, but then they just assign a line fee on the tax bill. That is just a garbage pickup fee that everyone basically is assigned that amount. It's still on the tax bill. So there are different variations out there. As staff, we have not done any thorough review on what would be appropriate in the way of additional financing mechanisms. It is something, though, that we'd be quite pleased to do and bring it forward as part of this package when we come back to, ultimately, would be to the next council, but I do believe that would be even further from a holistic perspective, so we'd be happy to add that into our workload.
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you. I think that would be an important piece to take a look at in this. I think it has the greatest opportunity to really push diversion rates. The question about the sticker cost of waste diversion and those opportunities, I think if those people want to produce more waste, let them pay for it. Fair enough. There's an opportunity to do so. Put it on, we could take garbage in general right off the levy, and then it would be a fee-for-service basis. I think there may be some illegal dumping challenges and problems with that, and that's what I'd be kind of curious about is how much of an issue exists in other municipalities that have that compared to those that do levy-based garbage collection. Because I think the 1.4% just on policy initiatives is a pretty low number for an increase in diversion if we can shift that activity towards collection. The other problem and concern I have with doing large collection and kind of the mixed waste processing at the plant is that there doesn't provide any incentive to people to reduce how much they put on the curb. It's just all goes into one place. So I'm glad we're moving in this direction. I'd like to see us aim a little higher, and I think it would be really helpful for us to have some concept of what levy or fee-for-service based garbage collection would look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Councillor Sally, Helmer, or Morgan? Helmer.
I remember a couple of years ago when we were talking about this issue during the budget discussions, I said it won't be long before we're talking about it again, and here we are. I am a bit surprised, I will say, that the mixed waste processing has not proven out to be more effective option. It seemed at the time, at least a couple of years ago, that that was a pretty promising area, and it seemed like we would probably end up building a facility and sending garbage in a mixed bag to that kind of facility. And I'm glad that through the investigations that we've done and looking into what other municipalities are doing, frankly, at the time, I think it was 2 years ago, you know, some municipalities were using mixed waste processing, and now they're backing off of it because it's not really delivering the results that they wanted. They're moving to source separated organics collection. Give the example of Edmonton, for example. And I think it's been to our benefit that we have taken the time to see what's going to happen. I know that many colleagues were ready to go on green bins a couple of years ago, and we didn't do that. But I think now we have better information, we're more well informed, and I think we're going to make a good decision when it comes time to the budget discussion on that. I will say, in terms of the budget, I think everyone approved the $35 million in the capital plan for new and emerging technologies without any discussion. So I think there's not a lot of disagreement about that, and I'm glad that it's there so we can draw down for the capital side, that it was can be used for this purpose instead, and I think it will be helpful. I did want to say to Councillor Van Holst, who seems to think that there's maybe a opening to not have high diversion targets. Perhaps the provincial government the new provincial government may have different reasons for wanting higher diversion targets than what the previous government wanted, but I think they're still going to want high diversion targets. And I will say, for example, that Minister Hardeman, who's the Minister of Rural Affairs, Food and Agriculture, he represents the County of Oxford, and the County of Oxford is very strongly opposed, for example, to the building of a private landfill in Oxford County. And Mr. Hardeman has been very clear that he does not want other municipalities sending their garbage to rural Ontario, including Oxford County. And so there are a lot of reasons to want higher diversion, and one of them is people don't want cities sending their garbage to their rural areas to dump it somewhere. And I think that the provincial government may have different reasons for supporting higher diversion, but I think they're going to be still supportive of this kind of target.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the staff recommendation? Moved by Deputy Mayor Hubert, seconded by... I'll second it. You want to discuss it some more, Councillor Burke? And then Councillor Squire?
I think, you know, I think this is an important discussion. It's a discussion I've been trying to have with constituents for quite a while, and I've said to them, you know, when they've talked about waste and their rights with regard to waste, you know, I want to put much garbage out on the curb as I can. I pay my taxes. I said, well, we're going to come to this stage where we're going to have this discussion about increasing our diversion rate. And I said, it's coming, and here it is. So I think it's a good discussion. I'm a little frustrated that we have to have an organic program, that people aren't embracing themselves. You know, it's not difficult to do organic recycling or composting in your backyard. It's something that I think a lot of families have done for years. And I think if this brings anything home to people, it would be that there's a lot of individual responsibility, whether it's, you know, discarding of all that food out of your refrigerator or all those little things that you can do. You know, I met a constituent last night who was adamant that they had the right to take anything they wanted, put it on the curb, and we should pick it up. And it took me a long time I don't think I convinced her at all that we all have an individual responsibility to divert garbage. My only concern here is that this fits into a larger picture for me, which is the multi-year budget. And I'm happy that this be approved to go out for public consultation, but when you say, you know, if I was to say today I approve in principle, I'm not sure what I'm approving. Am I approving it in detail? Am I approving the cost? And I know you may try to allay my concerns, but words are important. So I want to hear back from people. I haven't heard from very many people. So before I say, well, this is the plan I want to proceed with, I do want to hear from people. It may very well be the best plan. It may be what we want to do, but there's so many different variables going on that I want to hear from people. People in the industry, constituents, because now I've got something that I can go out there and say, look, here it is. Here's what's going to come forward. What can you do? What do you think? So I'm happy if there was a slight change to that wording so I could support it, but otherwise I can't approve it today because that's what I'm doing. I'm not going to approve a plan today before people have an opportunity to weigh in. That's important to me, so that's where I am.
Thank you, and through the chair to staff, if there was to be an amendment on B at the end of it, after it says be approved, at the addition of for public comment, would that give the staff the certainty that they need for the public consultation?
We'd be happy with it. We're looking for your endorsement, and whatever words satisfy committee and council, we're there.
Then I'd like to move that amendment, just at the addition of B, an addition at the end of B, be approved for public comment. I'll look for a seconder.
We're just gonna get that up on screen. I think it might be a different letter on screen than it is in the agenda, so staff will take care of that and, yeah. So for clarity to anyone watching, the blue report has a part A, which isn't what we have on screen. And so Councillor Park and Squire have suggested that what you see on screen, part A, says be approved in principle, and instead you would like it to read for public comment. So that's what we'll be voting on today. And colleagues, if you refresh your screen, you should see the amended Part A. And Councillor Park and Squire, can I get your okay to move forward? Yep. Okay, we'll put that up for voting.
Closing the vote, motion passed 4-0.
Thank you. Moving next to items for direction, item 4.1, King Street Bike Lanes. We received a number of public submissions on the agenda, and they're attached to that. And Councillor Park had some comments and perhaps a motion. So I'll look to Councillor Park.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an issue that has arisen with the changes that we made taking the buses off of Dundas Street. We've really increased the traffic flow on King Street, and it's been an issue that's been percolating and not in a very good way. I've heard from many cyclists, many pedestrians, many transit users about the concerns that they have with cyclists basically being squeezed off the road there, and it's a very congested corridor, and even despite the changes that we made earlier in the meeting to create that afternoon route at between the market and Richmond Street, there's still more work to do. So I do have a motion that takes into account the comments that have come through the public through their advocacy. The motion in effect is to direct the city engineer to come back to a Civic Works meeting no later than September with recommended options and associated costs the municipal council can consider for implementation that would result in enhanced safety for cyclists using the bike lane on King Street between Rideout and Colburn, and the new north-south cycle track with possible options that may include, but not limited to, reduced parking on the south side of King Street, the installation of barriers such as planters to create protected bike lane and appropriate signage. It being noted that there are physical constraints in the area with frequent public transit stops located along the routes. Part B, that the city engineer be directed to consult with the London Transit Commission, the Downtown Business Improvement Association, and the London Cycling Advisory Committee for input with respect to possible interim options to address the concerns raised by members of the public. The managing director further be directed to enhance communication efforts to improve drivers' awareness of cyclists using King Street, the need to ensure the safety of all road users, and C, the London Police Services be requested to increase their enforcement in the area location with a focus on driver behaviors that may adversely impact the safety of cyclists. As you can tell, that was a mouthful, and it's taken me a few days to do some further consultation, working with staff to come up with a motion that could work here. So I do apologize that it came to the meeting. I sent it out earlier on this afternoon, but as other councillors do work, I'm sure that they weren't able to read it in depth. So this is basically to get information back about how we can proceed to make sure that there are safe measures in place, making sure that everyone's using the road appropriately, that we have enforcement in place. This is not the only area in the city where concerns like this are, but this is a very high level area. It's a very well-used commuter cyclist route throughout the downtown, and I think it's very important that as a council that we look at this area, because it was our change to take the buses off of Dundas Street that created this situation. So I look forward to a report back looking about how we can work toward mitigating all of these issues.
I'm going to look to Ms. Sheriff for any comments on either the correspondence which came in or Ms. Park's motion. Sorry, Councillor Park's motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Certainly staff are quite aware of the concerns on King Street, and we do share them. There's been a significant change in how King Street works with the addition of transit from Dundas, as well as a number of major construction projects that have limited access both for vehicles and cyclists. So it is a busy corridor right now, and there is limited space. We have actually recently gone out for a request for quotations to do some enhanced pavement marking of the existing bike lane. It is not well marked right now, and we would suggest that that work ought to proceed. It's reasonably inexpensive and can be accommodated very quickly while we take a look at some of the interim solutions that might potentially deal with this in a longer term way. It'd also be important to dovetail that discussion into the east-west cycle track discussion. So with some decisions made about bus rapid transit in the last year by council, we have had to remove the plan for one on Queens Avenue, and we're now looking at a number of routes through the downtown, and that process will also wrap up. We expect to have a final report from the consultant in October. So subsequent to those two things being done, we are actually looking at citywide updates to the cycling master plan as well. There have been a number of changes that are impacting how cyclists can move around the city safely. And I think there's a good first step in us reporting back here on this particular issue and taking some immediate action to enhance the visibility of those lanes.
Committee, Deputy Mayor.
Madam Chair, I'll certainly support this because I'll look forward to the report back, but it's one of those perfect storms when you've got York Street closed and, you know, construction on Dundas Street and, you know, goofy me, I turned left last night to go north on Ride Out, and that didn't go really well because I got about one block and had to, so, you know, and then I got out on Richmond Street and it's down to one lane just north of Dufferin for some, you know, it's not even us. I think it's a construction thing. So it really is tough regardless of the mode of transportation. So I'll support this. I told Councillor Park I did a nosedive in the middle of King Street a couple of years ago. Been there, done that. Fortunately, the guy behind me didn't keep going and roll over me because I was clipped in. But, you know, I think we can improve the safety, but also it's a challenging season. Let's just put it that way. So, you know, I think it's good for cyclists to know that we're aware and we're concerned and we're trying to find solutions, but also, you know, certainly they have to look at alternative routes just because of all the construction as well. So it kind of goes both ways. And to cyclists, for the love of all that's holy, please do not bike on the sidewalk. I just about took a guy out because he was coming along and I couldn't see him and he was going the wrong way in terms of, he was actually going against the flow. And that creates so much trepidation as a driver, like I'm just afraid of hurting or hitting a cyclist. And so they need to follow the rules of the road too.
Councillor Squire.
Yeah, so I gave the chair heck yesterday because she brought a motion at committee and I hadn't seen it at all. This one, What's that?
It's a true story.
That's a true story, yeah, because I feel really strongly about it, that when I see something in front of me and I have to read it and make a decision, I'd never know if I'm making the right decision or not, and I was difficult with the chair yesterday, so I don't know if these are the solutions. I guess that's my issue. If it's a report, if this means you're going to report back and say, we have a problem here and here's what we think will take care of it and help with it in the interim, I'm fine with that. But and if you're comfortable with this as staff, I'm fine with that. But you know, I think we've got all kinds of issues downtown that I'm hearing about all the time. And with construction, for instance, disabled people are contacting me quite a bit about the construction we're doing, their inability to even get around downtown and in my ward because of that. And, you know, some of that is a temporary issue. So the other issue is if I don't support this, people are going to say, oh, Squire's against cycling, which I'm not. I cycle. I'm very positive about cycling and I love it. So I'm in a difficult spot. Is this the right motion? Is it going to accomplish anything? So I think I'll have to grudgingly support it and hope we come back with something that's realistic, you know, makes sense from all points of view.
Madam Chair, I think that the council raises a good point that we are looking at interim measures that can apply during some unique times in the downtown. I don't think that's wasted work, though, in the longer term. So when we have those options that we might be able to use on King, there are things that we can think about for future unusual situations. We have a lot of capital work coming up in the heart of the city over the next several years. So I think we are quite comfortable with coming back with a range of options, appropriate pricing, and how long those options could be in place. And that's what we would seek to bring back in September. We will proceed with the lane marking work regardless, because that gives us the opportunity to really at least highlight the space a little better in the interim.
Councillor Helmer.
So I'm glad that cyclists have brought this forward, and having biked along this bike lane while the buses are trying to veer in and out, I certainly understand the problem. And there's not too many places in London where I, as a cyclist, am really afraid. But that particular section of King Street is now one of those places. It used to be pretty fine. Ride along it, and mostly you're worried about people who are in the parking spots pulling out. That was the major sort of thing you'd be watching for from a defensive cycling perspective. Now, the buses, first of all, there's a lot of them. There's a bus, you know, almost like every 90 seconds there's a bus coming through there, and that's just the local service. And they're all trying to move over to pick up passengers, and that's the problem, right? So you've got a conflict that's going to happen over and over and over again. And you just want to know exactly where it is. And because the stops are relatively new, you don't really know where all those stops are, even if you're a transit rider, because everyone's getting used to where the new stops are located. And the drivers themselves are getting used to where the new stops are located. So we've got not just the car traffic, but these buses are moving over to pick people up. And every time they do that, they're coming into the bike lane. So I don't think lane markings are going to really solve the fundamental conflict, which is that the cyclists are in between the bus and the people that are trying to pick up. In retrospect, I think we should have saw that coming and had a plan from the start. I don't mean our staff, I mean us as a council, about how we're going to handle the diversion from the construction and the new buses onto King. It's one thing when it's just a few buses, but now it's all the buses. Have we looked at, and are we going to consider, like, just total reorientation of the lanes on that street? They're all one way. Should we just be moving the bike lane to the north side and have the bike lane along the north and keep them as far away from the buses and the buses picking people up as possible? Because we have a lot of room in the right of way, frankly, for the cycling. The problem, I think, is where it's located. That obviously introduces conflicts with left turning traffic, which is not great from a cycling perspective. I don't want to know that there's someone behind me that could be zooming out in front of me. But that might be better, honestly, than having it conflicts with the bikes and the buses all the time. So are we going to look at that? Is that actually better? Or is that a terrible idea that once we see it in practice, we would walk away from in horror?
Ms. Sher?
Madam Chair, if King were to become part of the new east-west cycle track at some point, and that decision is coming back to this committee shortly, there are probably two options at work, and one of them would be a one-way couplet where you'd actually see the bike lane closest to the south curb, and then you recreate a brand-new sidewalk that allows transit to have access for their kneeling buses for transit users. The alternative would be potentially a two-way bike lane on the north side of the street, which does create that conflict with left-turning vehicles. It can be managed with appropriate signaling, but that's an additional investment. The challenge with both of those is that they're going to take time. So that is an elimination of parking. It makes, if we're doing any barrier work, we have to make sure roadway drainage works. Certainly anything that would impact transit, having to try to get passengers through a bike lane on the south side is a challenge. So there's some work that would need to be done there that would take some time, and it doesn't give us a very quick turnaround, at least in terms of some visibility. If we wanted to invest more permanently in those assets, I think we also need to take it in the context of the BRT design as well. So if we're going to make a significant change on that roadway, it needs to be thoughtful, and it's probably not something we're able to do immediately. The bike lane marking is certainly less than perfect, and we have worked with LTC to try to make their drivers more aware of the concerns, and we'll continue to do so. But to move everything to the north side does create other challenges where we have to educate a number of drivers who are not perhaps as easy to reach as a group as LTC.
So hopefully when this report comes back, we can look at, even as a temporary way of handling the construction disruption, I think dropping down some concrete barriers along the north side, just like when we would extend a sidewalk to go around, if we have to bring a sidewalk around because somebody's on the actual sidewalk working on a building, to just push out into the lane and just drop the cycling lane on that side. I think that was something we need to look at pretty seriously, because I know that in the longer term, we can solve it with infrastructure changes, but that's not going to help us in the short term. And I think even if it meant losing part of a lane or the whole lane downtown from, the construction on Talbot all the way over to Wellington when the buses are exiting, I mean, that might be worth it, because we have these constant conflicts happening, and it's not going to be helpful if the solution is a cyclist on King Street should just divert onto York, or they should divert onto Dundas. That's not better for cyclists. What I've been doing in my own riding is basically just taking the lane on King, not the bike lane, but the full lane, because that way I can at least manage the conflicts with the buses. And I don't think that's really what we want downtown. So I don't know what the solution is, but I'm a little concerned that lane markings is not going to be enough.
Through the chair, to be clear, the lane markings would be an immediate response. It would help with some visibility. In the meantime, we will report back on other options that are more substantive as part of that report.
Okay, so there's a motion, I believe it was moved by Park and seconded by Hubert. Is there any further discussion? If not, we'll open the vote.
Closing the vote, motion passed 4-0.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is 4.2. It's a request for delegation status from Darlene Davis. I'm not sure if they're here today or if they're looking for a delegation at a future meeting. Ms. Davis, so committee, I look to you to see if you would like to get a delegation today, set it for another day, or have some further advice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've had many email correspondences with both Downtown London and the proprietors at Filthy Rubina, and I'd be happy to move that we get their delegation today, recognizing that Ms. Davis is here.
Is there a seconder for the delegation status? Councillor Squire? We'll get that vote up on screen, and then Ms. Davis, if you want to go to a microphone, our delegations are typically 5 minutes in length, and it's an opportunity for you to chat with the committee and share your thoughts. And as soon as we do the vote, I'll let you know when to kind of get started, okay?
Okay. So hello, everyone. I'm going to
Sorry,
make, oh,
just 1 second. We're just going to do the vote and I'll let you know when to start. And that vote should be on screen.
Closing the vote, motion passed 4-0.
Okay, Ms. Davis, the microphone is yours. Thank you very much.
thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm going to make this short and right to the point. My name is Darlene Davis. I'm a co-owner of Filthy Rabina Vintage, which is located at 177 Dundas Street, right across the street from the London Music Hall. A little bit about our shop. We've been open for 3.5 years at the Dundas location. Our customers are young men and women, mostly university students, ages 16 to 30. We carry high-end thrift at affordable rates, and we also carry Canadian designers and local artists here in town. So a little bit about me. I started Filthy Rabina Vintage back in 2011 with my business partner, Natalie Bradshaw. We were employed as wardrobe stylists in Toronto, and together we found ourselves jobless when we had a mass layoff at work. We needed money, so we started selling our own personal clothing at flea markets under the name Filthy Rabina Vintage. So I'm just trying to illustrate that we have always made the best out of any bad situation. I could probably have a lemonade stand. So anyway, like I said earlier, I've been slinging clothes on Dundas Street for 3.5 years. I'm familiar with Dundas Street and its quirks. However, lately it's been very difficult to make anything good out of our current situation being on the very seam of construction. I don't know if you know, but there's a big orange fence right at my store. So, since the construction has taken place, we felt increasingly afraid for our safety. The giant orange fence right outside of our shop is encouraging people to loiter up against it, and rightfully so, because there isn't a flow of foot traffic, vehicles, or any deterrents to move people along. I'd like to note that nobody is really paying attention to this area anymore. Like you said, there's no buses, there's no movement, there's really not a lot of life around there. The street is littered with cigarette butts, garbage, and now, thanks to the fence, a lot of drug paraphernalia. Drug users seem to be using the fence for concealment and like to shoot up right along the seam of construction. Since construction has started, we've seen an uptick in theft and a decline in sales. We had to open a second location in a beach town to keep us afloat this summer. Having a second location means that we often have to leave our London staff alone at work. When I decided to be here tonight and to voice what's been going on, one of my 20-year-old employees was called very derogatory names and spit at by somebody that's been hanging out on the fence lately. I phoned the police and we learned that being spit on and derogatory words is not a crime. So my heart aches for my staff. My young female customers feel unsafe outside of the shop. I'm overall embarrassed of my Dundas Street location. I feel like our message has been lately, come spend your money here, and maybe you'll be harassed as well. So we aren't sure of solutions or the next steps to take, but I'm here to say that I think you could consider some options to deal with the loitering. We definitely could use maybe a stronger police presence or a private security person, maybe a stationed construction worker, like right there at the seam. Maybe increase foot traffic by doing a marketing campaign like the love locks, where people put locks on fences and it's supposed to, support love and increase foot traffic to a bad area. So we can make lemonade out of this bad situation. The businesses on Dundas are willing to bend backwards to make Dundas Place a success. However we can. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. If you want to stay nearby, I'm going to go to the committee just to see if they have any questions for you. We'll look. No questions for Ms. Davis before she sits back down? Yep, Councillor.
Yeah, just to clarify, spitting on someone is an assault. It is. So I just wanted to clarify that because
Okay.
I don't want people to leave here with the impression that you can spit on someone and there's no repercussions. That's a common thing actually that happens, that people get charged with assault. And I understand the issue, and if I could just comment, I'm not sure what, like we have staff who are taking care of the downtown area there, and Mr. Yanchul is here. I would have thought this would be something that people would be having, that the best source of contact would be staff that is involved in this. People like Mr. Yanchula, and the BIA, people who are directly involved. Maybe Mr. Yanchula can help.
Thank you. I think Mr. Yanchula has some comments, or did you want to weigh in?
Thanks for the opportunity. Through the chair, Darlene and Natalie are among the most engaged business owners along Dundas Place, and I'm not surprised to see her here today. We have tried to address some of the concerns, but she is at a unique place. She's at the pinch point on the construction site right now, and she's got some people that are routinely on the street in her particular location that compromises her business more than many others along the route. And we're looking to address this not as a matter of simply the construction, which of course is affecting her particular location, but throughout the greater core areas, because we know that there is a lot more activity than we were used to seeing before the construction fences went up. So in terms of loitering and stronger police presence and bylaw enforcement, we are actively working on uptick in resourcing that we should start to see some results in the next few weeks. And also in terms of the marketing campaign, there is a movement afoot to have something happen within the next month or so specific to the block from where Darlene's business is over to the Wellington side, because that's an active block that could have more feet on the street. It takes time to put these things together. I'm extremely sympathetic to hers and the other situation. The others who have this situation, but it isn't completely a construction-related problem. It is a problem in many behaviors in the core. So working as hard as we can on it, it just won't be an immediate sense of relief. And having you hear it right from a business owner, I think, is effective because she's one of others who have also had to make lemons out of lemonade, or make lemonade out of lemons.
Councillor Park?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe the first conversation I had with both Natalie and Darlene was about this, but way before the construction happened. It's just one of those really unfortunate things that we're seeing in our downtown and neighborhoods throughout the city is the social issues on our street. So we've done work as a council to create the core area steering committee and the liaison committee dealing with the social issues in the downtown, and it is very highlighted at this point. I do want to thank Mr. Yanchula. I know he's done a lot of feet on the street work with business owners along the Dundas corridor throughout this process. I want to thank, I see Andrew's here from downtown London. I know that he's done a lot of work also with businesses through this difficult time of construction. I would ask staff that has this been a point of conversation through the steering committee and the other liaison committee that's been created at this point?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have a regular update from Jim at the Core Area Steering Committee to talk about some of the issues we're facing in the downtown. And certainly, the fence itself has been a bit of a point of contention with some businesses. Obviously, it's there for safety reasons and needs to remain. I think that Mr. Yanchul is quite correct, as is the councillor, that this is a bit of a broader social context. And we actually had quite a productive meeting this morning with the senior leadership team, so all of the managing directors, as well as the Core Area Coordinating Team, which is the people frontline within the city who are working on some of the issues in the downtown to work on a short-term action plan, and I think there'll be more information coming on that. In the meantime, it's a longer-term problem to solve beyond the scope of construction management. So I think Mr. Yanchul and his team and their partners have been working very hard on it, but I don't have an easy solution in terms of getting rid of some of the challenging behavior.
Are there any other comments? Councillor Van Hulst, sorry, I did see you earlier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to the proprietor. I scored lots of points with my wife for making a great purchase at your vintage store. and I was thrilled with that. The question I have through you to our staff is just the possibility of something like a camera, or is there something physical we can do with a fence that have people less likely to lean up against it? That seems to be the problem. Can we make it less, it seems to be an attractive place to be. Can we make that less attractive somehow?
So it's interesting because we were trying to make first of all, let me answer the question about the construction fence. There's an approved construction plan that requires a fence to be in a certain location for certain reasons with certain clearances, and that is being abided by now by the location of the fence. It is unfortunate, but there's a clear sidewalk area that is as big as we can have it in the tight construction site that we have right now. So moving the fence is very difficult to move and still comply with that approved plan. What's the other thing you asked me about? What's the fence? I'm sorry. The sturdiness is fine. It's not, yeah, it's bolted to the pavement right now. But what we were trying to do is beautify it. We were trying to make it a more attractive place. And so we added planters right in front of the construction fence, which happens to be, as Darlene has said, in front of her business, in the hopes that it would be more attractive for her business people, not more attractive for the people who ended up being her bane right now. So we could remove that and create more room around the fence, but then it wouldn't be as attractive about what's there. I think the real problem is that it's the socially undesirable behaviors to the point of illegal things like the assaults that have to be dealt with, and that's with a human, not with the location of the fence. So patrols can help. We're working with the core area patrols right now. They the guys on bikes do their loop and come around. It's just really difficult that there can't be somebody standing there with their arms crossed, looking at all of the behavior and being able to do something about it. So like I said to begin with, Filthy Rabina's proprietors are the most engaged, solution-oriented people we have on the street, and we're in a really tough spot to try to be able to come up with something else that we can do with the construction fence that complies with the construction requirements and doesn't create enough of a deterrent for the behaviors that are compromising the business for Filthy Rabina.
Okay, Councillor Squire had suggested he might move receipt. I'll look to you if there's anything else.
Yeah, I really believe, I understand the problem, and just so you know, I represent a different ward, and probably the biggest problem I hear about in my ward is thefts and break-and-enters, people breaking into their homes, people breaking into their cars, based really on social problems and social issues. And the first thing I usually hear from people is, where are the police? Where are the police? And, you know, I was sitting in the police chief's office asking him that question the other day, and he just showed me his computer. And at that particular time, which was 10:30 in the morning, every police officer in the City of London was engaged in a call. And there was a waiting list to have calls answered of 23 people. So there's resource issues in dealing with these particular problems. I think the Corps has people allocated. So I'm going to move receipt and filing. I think there's a huge value in you being here today and that we're aware of it. And I think Mr. Danchula is aware of it. But it's an on-the-ground solution that I'm hoping you'll find through the staff. So that's my motion.
Seconded by Deputy Mayor Hubert. We'll put that up on screen.
Closing the vote, motion passed 4-0.
Thank you, Ms. Davis, for coming in and sharing that with us today. I trust that Mr. Danchula and your contacts with downtown London are going to be able to assist, and you've certainly made us aware, and hopefully given the opportunity to, share a little bit about your store and get a little bit more foot traffic going on there and some more creative solutions to come forward. Next item on the agenda is 4.3, the 7th report of the Cycling Advisory Committee. I believe this is for direction because of item 5.1, which is the work plan. So we can put the report on the floor to be moved and seconded by Deputy Mayor Hubert, seconded by Councillor Park.
Closing the vote, motion passed 4-0.
Okay, next item is 4.4. Moved by Deputy Mayor Hubert, seconded by Councillor Squire. Can we put that up on screen?
For voting or just up on the screen?
For voting.
Closing the vote, motion passed 4-0.
The next item up is item 4.5, traffic light at South Carriage Road and Hyde Park Road, and Deputy Mayor Hubert is looking to get my attention. Yeah. Microphone.
Madam Chair, we have two requests for delegation. I think based on the correspondence we've received, and I'm sure Councillor Morgan would like to speak to this. I think it's pretty apparent what the end game is here. So just to sort of maybe preempt and tell the committee where I'm at on this one, and I've sent the clerk a very brief motion, which is simply that we direct staff to install lights at South Carriage Road and Hyde Park Road and find a source of funding to be able to do that. Toot sweet, ASAP, or pronto, whichever language you prefer. And I suspect that that's what the delegations are going to communicate, and so perhaps we can expedite this. So that will be my motion at the appropriate moment, and I think I'll let Councillor Morgan maybe add more. It's not preamble, it's probably postamble to my preamble.
Thank you. So I have Deputy Mayor Hubert as making that motion, Councillor Squire seconding that motion. I will say to Councillor Morgan, sometimes it's better to quit when you're ahead, but I will give you the mic if you have something that you would like to say.
Well, I will say something. I certainly appreciate the chair's caution, but I will say this is also something that the last time I brought it up was a 1-vote difference at council. And so I do think that there is, if the committee entertains it, value in understanding the concerns of the community, because there is something that has changed since last I brought that up, and that is there is a fully functional and fully operational school community, some significant new development, as well as new connections and roadways into the community that change the way that even people access this area of the city. And so the school community is a very significant voice of concern. We also have a new functioning BIA that engages with its members in a different way, who've been engaged with this process all the way through. And they do have some very important things to say. If you would want to hear them, I actually have some notes as well, but I appreciate that the committee has its right to go the way it has, recognizing that they have no ability to speak at council either. I could certainly speak if there's a big debate there on their behalf, but I will leave it at that and leave it with the committee. I don't think that they will be long. if they want to hear shortly from them, because I would hate to not listen to them and have this, for some reason, defeated at council, and us not having gone through that process in a way that they felt was fairly hearing their voice. And I would speak after them briefly if there's anything that I thought needed to be added.
Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I'm certainly prepared to have the delegation. I just wanted them to know where we were headed and that there wasn't the need to beat us into submission tonight. And I certainly am in full agreement with Councillor Morgan on this. We knew that this was going to happen. We told council that this was going to happen. And quite frankly, as per Councillor Morgan's letter, when we tell a bus company to not go directly out to a secondary collector or arterial and rather dipsy-doodle through the neighborhood, we've got a problem. And for me, that's as clear as a bell. So I look forward to hearing what the folks have to say.
Thank you. So you're making a motion to hear the delegation from the 2 requested delegates, and that's seconded by Councillor Park. And so that will be up on screen. And then what I will do, I will look to Dee Foster and Donna to see who would like to go first and second, and let you work that out up there as soon as we give you the go-ahead with the vote here, okay?
Closing the vote, motion passed 4-0.
Mr. Foster, welcome. You are welcome to speak to the committee for up to 5 minutes on this matter.
So greetings from Ward 7, and thank you for giving our Red Light Committee the opportunity to once again put our concerns on the public record. I want to begin by thanking Josh Morgan for his service to the ward, and in particular for his advocacy over the past 4 years on a proposal which he inherited from his honor, Matt Brown. In 2014, our committee presented the Civic Works Committee of the day with a petition supported by over 600 ward residents, the Hyde Park Business Association, and Tri-Car Development to include traffic signals at the corner of Hyde Park and South Carriage Roads as part of a $40 million Hyde Park road widening project. We were unsuccessful in convincing council that the best time to make this change was while shovels were already in the ground. Naturally, the road upgrade proceeded and has been a great success. It has driven the desired residential and commercial intensification, which is critical to the development of our area. To name a few key developments, Oxford Dodge, Tim Hortons, 1020 and 1040 Coronation Drive, Westfield Phase 1 and 2, West Coronation Community, and the new 12-story apartment building on South Carriage Drive. In 2016, as the project was winding down and with surplus funds available, Josh showed leadership, or Josh led a second attempt to present this forward-thinking motion to council, yet failed to garner enough support, though it was defeated by only 1 vote, as he mentioned earlier. Today, 4 years later, conditions in Northwest London have continued to change dramatically, and for the better. The daily traffic along Hyde Park Road has drastically increased to over 30,000 vehicles daily each way, and despite a posted speed limit of 50 kilometers per hour and the presence of London police, which we thank, speeds are increasing to an alarming extent regardless. Attempts to make a left-hand turn onto Hyde Park Road from South Carriage Road or onto South Carriage Road in the face of north and southbound traffic can be a stressful and frightening experience, especially when road conditions are slick due to rain and snow. A second growing problem for the residents of adjacent neighborhoods along Coronation Drive, Brunswick Ave, Aldersbrook Road, and the newly completed extension of Lawson Road is dealing with the resulting higher volume of traffic, including I might add, heavy construction vehicles, which are tearing apart the roundabouts, the signage, etc. And this is caused by frustrated motorists seeking alternate routes to avoid this intersection. The addition of the St. John French Immersion Catholic Elementary School has added 17 school buses to the mix. Josh mentioned the solution that was suggested to them. I agree that that seems a little odd that we would have them go outside of a secondary road, but that seems to be the advice they've gotten. And so they're following Coronation Drive. And I guess we're facing the citizens going for a second motion, which would be unnecessary traffic calming initiatives, which might be put into place as have been in some other school areas. So with that in mind, and to keep this brief, we would just ask to please help Hyde Park residents feel safer while maneuvering on our streets by eliminating this existing dangerous situation. We're asking yet again for you to support this renewed proposal, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Foster. Welcome.
Hi. Okay. I think I'm gonna have to, thank you for having me. As you know, I'm Donna Spikowski. I'm with the Hyde Park BIA. 4 years ago, the Hyde Park Business Association worked closely with Dan and the Red Light Movement and the community members, gathering over 600 signatures to get a traffic signal installed at this dangerous corner. Now I'm representing the Hyde Park BIA Board of Management, and it is their direction that we continue our support of a traffic light being installed at this corner. We understand that staff are unable to recommend this traffic signal as it did not meet the warrants. But we also understand that that this committee and council can make this happen outside of the warrant process. For 2 years prior to the road widening, even beginning, we worked closely with our businesses, staff, and planners, engineers, to discuss ideas, potential issues, and design elements of the widening. However, we never discussed that the purpose of the widening was to create a rapid, high-speed highway in Northwest London, and this is what it has become. We believe Hyde Park Road needs traffic calming, especially at this corner. The intersection is not only busy with fast-moving vehicles and vehicles attempting to make unsafe left turns, it's also shared with many pedestrians. Pedestrians who regularly cross, we see them running across, they stop in the medium, and then they dodge cars trying to get to the other side. It's just a matter of time before somebody gets their life lost. A lot of the people, what they're trying to do is get from one green space to another that's broken by the highway, Hyde Park Road. And soon, as has been mentioned, we will have a school which will dramatically increase both pedestrian traffic and vehicle traffic. Like Josh, we implore this committee and council to listen to the community regarding very real safety concerns being brought forward by granting us this traffic signal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilor Morgan?
Yes, just briefly. The only thing I would add is something that I brought up last time I raised this, and that is an absolute respect for the professional opinions of our engineering staff and our transportation staff in executing council's warrant system. But I also recognize that council can, notwithstanding their advice, move forward on this when there are conditions in the community that they feel are necessary. And I certainly feel, as I have said last time, before the school opened, that was a significant concern to me. That concern has come to fruition, and that is one of the main reasons why it is here again. I can tell you also that although did not have delegation status, Jane Ross, chair of the Parents' Council for that school, is in the audience as well. And there have been hundreds of pieces of correspondence on this with either businesses, school members, people who live in the area. And of all of the messages I've seen, there is no one who does not want to see this happen. So it is, I've never seen anything in my time as a councillor so unanimous on an issue. And so I think it's something that hopefully we can support.
Councilor Park?
Thank you, and thank you to Deputy Mayor for bringing his motion forward if he hadn't, and I had one in the hopper ready to go also. I was in the area last week and the things I saw really brought home the need for some work on that intersection, so I'll definitely be supportive of the motion that Deputy Mayor Huber has brought forward.
Okay. And so Deputy Mayor or Councillor Park, you have a motion that you've already sent to the clerk. Let's see if that goes up on screen. Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. I believe I might have been, well, maybe not the only one, but I'm certainly one of the few councillors who didn't support putting in the traffic light at this intersection last time we talked about it. There were a bunch of us, but not many of us are here today. I wanted to ask through the chair to our staff whether anything has changed in terms of the operations of this intersection. Have we done any kind of traffic study to see what's going on now that there's been some new developments in the area and some changes have happened at the roadway? I know that last time the warrant was, 100% on one, and it was around 50 something, or combined warrant 80% on both, and again it was about 50 something on both. So what's changed in the last year and a half in terms of the actual operations of the intersection?
Looks like Ms. Scher is throwing it to Mr. McGuire.
Through the chair, let you inform you that there was a traffic study performed on November 2nd of last year to compare to the traffic study that was done the year previous. Yes, traffic volume has increased. It still is not meeting the warrant. The warrant looks for meeting 80% for at least 8 of the 8 hours. Currently, there's 2 of those hours are meeting the warrant. So that sort of gives you an idea where it sits. As I said, the volumes have increased and the warrant has, processed further closer to meeting the warrant, but again, it still hasn't reached that warrant level yet.
So if you could put that in quantitative terms for me, last time in the report, I think you had some kind of summary about what percentage of the warrant it was meeting. I seem to remember it being like low 50s, so I'm not sure how to translate. It's over the warrant level for part of the time, but under for the rest. So I wonder if you could simplify it for me.
So again, through the chair, the warrant looks at a number of different things, but the 2 that sort of stand out are the volume of traffic and the delay experienced by the traffic. It also does look at the pedestrians. So when we studied this in 2016, the warrants for those 2 things were 53% and 54%. In 2017, the warrant is 69% and 64%. So as I mentioned, it has progressed, but it still isn't meeting those either a combined 80 for both of those or 100% for either of them.
Okay. Sorry, I looked at Councillor Helmer. It looked like that resolved your questions. So there's a motion that's up on screen, moved by Councillor Deputy Mayor Hubert, seconded by Councillor Park. Is there any further discussion on the motion on screen? If not, we will open the vote.
Closing the vote, motion passed 4-0.
Okay, for the next item, I'm going to ask the Vice Chair to take the chair. I don't know if you want it from that position or this.
Right. And with that, we're at item number 4.6, residential damage for stormwater discharge. Councillor Ridley.
Thank you, Vice Chair and Acting Chair. I put this item on in consultation with our city staff because we have an issue with houses in subdivisions that were built during a certain generation in terms of their storm and sump discharge. And so staff pointed me to a successful program that they've currently have underway on Guildwood, and I would like to see expansion of that program, some information back, and potentially some action on Mockingbird Crescent. And so I would like to defer to staff to explain a bit more about the program and why they pointed me in this direction as a potential remedy for the problem that we're running into with this generation of subdivision.
Mr. Mathers?
Through the chair, as mentioned, currently there's a pilot project that's ongoing on Guildwood. This is an area that has 27 homes, and there was a report that was back in May 2015 that approved this pilot project. What's been experienced with this generation of homes, and there's approximately 13,000 properties in the city that were built during this time, but many don't have any kind of an issue. But there are some areas that where the groundwater level is very high, that you may have your sump pump going 24 hours a day all year long. And in those areas, you have circumstances where you either have a lot of water and very wet grounds during the summer months, but then in the winter months, you have ice that's being created. So that's not just on the roadways, but also on the sidewalk, causing an unsafe condition for many of the people, not just that live in those homes, but also that travel through those areas. So we brought forward this project, and we had 100% people buy into the project, and it has been, for the most part, successful. We're constructing it currently, and we hope that'll be done by this fall. Now in Mockingbird Crescent, we have a number of homes that are under the same condition, that they have a sump pump that discharges to the surface. However, they don't have a storm sewer that fronts their property. And of that group of 13,000 homes that were created in this period of time, a subset of those didn't have a storm sewer that were constructing in front of their home. So what we would propose, or we're considering as part of this resolution, would be looking at different types of technologies to try to address that situation. So looking at low impact development, possibly infiltration facilities, but those are the types of ideas and what we can come forward with you at a future date. As far as the timing for a report, we would hope to bring this back for September. So for a timing for the deferred item list, I would suggest like a fourth quarter timing.
Thank you. So having been very familiar with flooding and stormwater damages, the first thing I always do when I hear from people that are experiencing this is I point them to our existing basement flooding grant programs, and that's what I did in this case. And the two of the people that I pointed in that direction called me right back and said, "Why are you sending me there? I don't qualify because we don't have a storm." I said, what do you mean you don't have a storm in where you live? And in fact, in that small area of time, because they were slightly uphill, the thought process was, well, all that storm will flow down and we only have to do the storm on the bottom half of the street. And so they have spent a considerable amount of time, money, and energy, and I have to stress, continually readdressing, going to engineers and experts and saying, what is the solution here? Okay, great, I'll do it. I fund it myself, I do it. And it still doesn't solve the problem. And so I was glad that staff are willing to consider this. And so I'd like to make the motion that I submitted to committee. Hopefully I have a seconder and someone else, and hopefully we can move forward in getting some information back.
Okay, looking to committee. Deputy Mayor?
I'll second the motion, and actually this is the second project, because the Guildwood project was a continuation of the Brunswick Street project, and the councillors and Mr. Mather's absolutely correct. This was done in an era that we certainly wouldn't do it this way today. And in the Guildwood case, it was actually sift and built on a swamp, and it's there's always water. So we're kind of rectifying problems of a previous generation. So,
any further speakers? Okay. Seeing none, I can call the question, but I will have to vote on my own computer.
Closing the vote, motion passed 4-0.
And Councillor Ridley has the chair.
Thank you for your help, Vice Chair. And so I think that brings us to the deferred matters list, and then we also have an added third report of the Waste Management Group. So I'll start with the deferred matters list and look for a motion to receive the list. Moved by Park, seconded by Squire. We'll put that up on screen.
Closing the vote, motion passed 4-0.
And it looks like we just need a motion to receive the Waste Management Working Group, moved by Deputy Mayor Hubert, seconded by Park. Any discussion on that? We'll get that up on screen.
Closing the vote, motion passed 4-0.
And a motion for adjournment by hand, Councillor Park, seconded by Councillor Squire. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries.